Hello once again, and welcome to Anime Bar. Cars explains the use of red stone of Aja, stating that it's missing a piece of the stone mask. It has a high refractive power to protect them from the sun. Lisa explains to Jojo and Caesar that she is the guardian of the red stone of Aja. Her maid, Suzy brings the red stone for them to see. For the final test, Caesar must face Meshina, while Jojo faces Logs. When the battle is about to start, Jojo discovers that Idisi has killed Logs. Battle unfolds between them. Jojo cuts off Esidy's arm. After, he then replaces it with Log's arm, which causes Log's body to melt due to the high temperature of Idisi's body. Lisa already feels the presence of an intruder. Meanwhile, during Caesar and Meshina's battle, Meshina admits defeat, and the battle stops. They notice Jojo fighting Idisi, but since he's far away, they decided to go to Lisa to protect the redstone. During the battle, Idisi burns off Jojo's breathing correction mask. After fierce resistance from both parties, with Idisi using his hot boiling blood to his advantage, Jojo manages to defeat Idisi and obtain the antidote from his nose ring. Immediately he drinks it. The poison ring Idisi placed around his windpipe dissolves. Unknowingly to Jojo, Idisi's brain attached itself to Jojo's back after the battle. Jojo feels a heavy sensation around his shoulder, due to the effect of Idisi's brain. By the dawn, Lisa is seen at her balcony as she awaits the arrival of Jojo and Caesar, and while Suzy contemplates on which clothes to select for Lisa, Lisa selects one of the clothes to save her from her indecisiveness before proceeding to take her bath. She drops a message to Suzy, telling her to direct Jojo and Caesar to her room once they arrive. Suzy leaves the room and encounters Jojo. She doesn't recognize him without his mask on. Jojo flirts with her until she admits that he looks handsome. Suzy delivers Lisa's message to her, but warns him to wait half an hour as she is bathing. After the conversation, Jojo notices that his shoulder feels normal. Idisi's brain doesn't seem to be on his back anymore. While waiting, he decides to peep into Lisa's room. He notices slime all over her doorknob before realizing that Suzy had been taken over by Idisi. At that time, Caesar had already arrived. Idisi uses Suzy to steal the redstone and out on the ship to Italy. He uses a relationship with them as an advantage, as he knows they won't hurt her. Jojo and Caesar work back together to eject Idisi out of Suzy by using Heyman. While the sun burns Idisi's brain, Lisa accesses Suzy's subconsciousness, and they discover that the stone is on its way to Saint-Morty, Switzerland. In Switzerland, Cars is disgruntled as he wonders why Idisi is late. At the train station, Jojo and the others encounter a group of German soldiers who receive the redstone. One of them seemed to know Jojo. The soldier proposes a partnership between them. Cars attacks one of them in the night, where it is revealed that the German soldier, acting familiar with Jojo, is Major von Stroheim. Jojo is surprised to see Major Stroheim alive. During the battle, it is discovered that Major Stroheim's body was built back with machines, using the same mechanism of San Viento's body. Unfortunately, he is no match for Cars' bone claw weapon. Cars slices through all of the bullets fired at him and slices Major Stroheim into half before retrieving the redstone. Major Stroheim fires out a beam from his eyes, which makes Cars lose the redstone, and it starts sliding downwards a cliff. Jojo and Cars begin to pursue it. Jojo manages to retrieve the redstone before it falls off the cliff, but Cars uses his bone claw to drag Jojo down the cliff with him. Jojo overcomes barely by forming an ice rope using Heyman, along with Caesar's help. In Switzerland, Caesar plans to storm Cars' house using the sunlight to his advantage and beat him, but Jojo disagrees, saying there may be a pre-installed measures. This leads to a fight between them, as Jojo is pissed off at the fact that Caesar is always blabbling about honoring his family. A flashback scene is shown talking about Caesar's background. Caesar is the son of an excellent furniture maker named Mario. Mario was a perfect and loving father until he abandoned them one day, leaving Caesar and his siblings to fend for themselves. Caesar survives on the street, unknowingly using his Heyman. He encounters his dad when he was 16 in Rome. He follows him into a building where he sees the Pillar Men. He tries to touch a diamond on one of them, but his dad protected him, even though he couldn't recognize Caesar. He directs Caesar to Lisa upon hearing his story. Jojo has a change of heart and follows Caesar. Caesar already arrives at Cars' home, where he encounters a strange wind figure, who he discovers to be Wamo. Meshina joins Cars to fight, but Wamo cuts off his arm and drags him inside. Caesar discovers that Wamo uses wind to protect himself from the sun. Due to his training, Caesar is able to manipulate his Hammond bubble. By deploying bubble cutters, these seem far more effective. The battle continues inside. Caesar gives Wamo a hard time, but Wamo barely defeats Caesar. Caesar manages to retrieve the antidote from Wamu's lip ring. He puts the remaining Hammond and the ring inside a bubble he created with his blood before the rock crushes him. Jojo and Lisa wail bitterly upon discovering that Caesar is dead. Jojo bursts the bubble and releases Caesar Haman from it. Jojo swears to avenge Caesar's death. The building Cars on the other hid in is a 14th century abandoned hotel, which leaves Lisa and Jojo to disadvantage. As they don't know the interior of the building, they follow the trail of blood left behind by Wamo. On their way, they encounter the vampire, who Lisa defeats flawlessly by using her scarf to channel Hammond into the vampire. Jojo is surprised at her strength. She advises Jojo to drink the antidote, but Jojo refuses, saying he will take it only after he defeats Wamo. As they proceed, they meet Wamo, who seem to have fully recovered. They also encounter Cars. Wamo asks for permission to face Jojo in battle as a revenge for killing a citizen, but Cars refuses, saying they need to focus on obtaining the stone. Cars plans on using 100 vampires to eliminate Lisa and Jojo, but Lisa proposes a deal. The deal entails having Car faces Lisa in battle, while Wamo faces Jojo. The victor will claim the redstone. Cars accepts, and Wamo select the venue and the time of the fight. They decide to keep Lisa as insurance while Jojo goes back to bring the stone. Jojo discovers a portrait picture of Lisa when she was a baby, Irina, Strizo, and Robert. When he arrives at the venue for the battle, he shows Lisa the portrait, then she explains she was the baby that Irina saved 50 years ago. Jojo is surprised at her young appearance despite her young age. The battle begins as opponents will use the vampire horses to face each other. The battle begins soon enough with the crowd yelling Yamo's name. Before the battle starts, Jojo removes rubbles of stone from the foot of his chariot and plants some to hinder the movements of Wamo's chariots. Immediately the battle starts. Jojo takes off, but Wamo's chariot is still stuck in rubbles. Jojo grabs the first weapon from the column, being a hammer. Soon enough, Wamo breaks free and starts the battle. He breaks the entire column and uses it to smack Jojo out of his chariot. Jojo manages to survive that. Wamo attaches himself to Jojo's horse and uses that opportunity to deliver a sandstorm to him. But Jojo was quick to counter it with his Hammond, which weakens Wamo's arms. This damages Wamo's confidence, as he is looked stunned while riding. Wamo gets a grip of himself by ripping out his eyes and summoning a horn from his forehead, and using it to sense Jojo. The next set of weapons, which are crossbows, are released at Car's signal. Jojo grabs the bigger crossbow, thinking it will give him more power, but unfortunately it was quite the opposite. As Jojo loses balance and falls to the ground, his crossbow clicks, and he fires it using the same technique Wamo used. When Wamo is least suspecting, it delivers a fatal blow to Wamo. Wamo is then forced to use his last ultimate move, where he summons pipes from his body and uses it to suck massive amounts of air. Wamo summons his arms that have been cut off earlier to grip Jojo's neck and hinder his breathing. The pipes suck in massive amounts of air and release it through a thin slit at high pressure, which causes friction that Wamo's body can't even handle, which is why it is referred to as his last move. Jojo comes up with an idea. Since he can't use Haman, he throws a bottle of oil to the floor and lets Wamo's pipe suck the oil, and then he sets Caesar's bandana on fire, and it ignites the oil that had been sucked into Wamo's body, causing him to explode. Jojo finally claims the victory that shocked everybody. He pours his blood on Wamo's to ease his pain as the sign of honor, as Wamo did to Caesar. The vampires try to attack Jojo, but Wamo defends him after finding out that Jojo is a man of honor. He urges him to drink the antidote before he dies, which Jojo does, and finally, Wamo dies. Cars faces Lisa in another location. He uses a double to trick her, before finally knocking her out. Jojo drowns in disappointment. He rises up to face Cars, but the vampire starts attacking him. His Haman is already weak and can't kill them effectively. Fortunately, he is saved by Smokey, Robert, Major Stroheim and his soldiers, as they use the UV light to conquer the vampires. Cars ties Lisa's legs and throws her down, forcing Jojo to save her as a distraction. Smokey and Robert are scared to the bones to see this dangerous situation, while Smokey reveals that Lisa is Jojo's mother. Major Stroheim and the soldiers continue to fend off the vampires with their UV light. Smokey suggests to Robert that they tell Jojo that Lisa is his mother, but Robert refuses. Jojo continues to fight Cars. He sets his scarf on fire as a distraction while he ties the rope to Cars' legs and the other end to his and Lisa. As Cars cut the rope, he ends up being support to Lisa and Jojo. Jojo delivers a fatal attack to Cars with the last of his Haman, which sends Cars down to the ground. Smokey asks Robert why the truth was concealed from Jojo. Robert explains that Lisa was the baby Irina saved 50 years ago, and she grew up to marry her son, George. They both gave birth to Jojo. George was in the aviation team during the war and was known as a hero for his courageous feats. one of the vampire that Dio created 50 years ago, managed to escape and still live, saving his victims in the shadows, and he manages to be the head of the aviation team. George discovers this and gets killed by the vampire, but it gets covered up by the plane crash. Lisa is engulfed by rage and uses her Heyman to kill the vampire. But to the rest of the world, she killed the commander of the aviation team. So she became a fugitive and ran away from Jojo in order to protect him. Irina is consumed by sorrow, and she asks Robert to lie to Jojo anytime he asks about his parents. Meanwhile, Major Stroheim gets ready to use the UV amplifier to destroy Cars. But Cars emerged with the red stone installed on the stone mask. The UV amplifier can't be stopped anymore. It blasts Cars and powers him up, while the mask falls off. It is discovered that Cars has a new ability to manipulate life forms as he wishes. He changes his palm into a zombie squirrel that attacks most of the soldiers. Jojo and the others are terrified by this new ability. Soon the sun rises and begins to burn off the vampires. But unfortunately, Cars still remains intact, as the sun only adds to his power. Jojo then decides to lead Cars away by running away. Cars summons wings from his back and pursues Jojo to kill him. Jojo jumps off a cliff into a German warplane and starts leading Cars away with him. Robert contacts Jojo through a radio to convince him to stop, but Jojo gets an idea to lead Cars away into a nearby volcano and burn him. Soon, the shells turn into zombie dishes that start devouring the ship. Jojo then deploys a parachute with a dummy attached to it to lure Car in front of the plane. It works and he jams Cars. Major Stroheim assists Jojo by shooting his mechanical arm to attach Cars to the plane. While it crashes into the volcano, Jojo jumps out and Major Stroheim saves him, while Cars burns inside of the lava. Cars creates a crab-like covering his skin, but the lava easily burns it off. He then drowns inside of the lava. Jojo and Major Stroheim think he is dead, so they turn back and leave. Unfortunately for them, Cars has already formed a covering on his body using air bubbles instead, which gives them enough time to burrow through the ground and bust out in the middle of Robert and Jojo, slicing off Jojo's arm in the process. Jojo tries to use Hammond on Cars, but it backfires. As Cars proceeds to strike Jojo dead with Hammond, Jojo points to the red stone at his direction. The stone amplifies his attack and directs it to the ground. This quickens the eruption of the volcano and sends the slab that he and Cars are standing on flying into space. Cars tries to float back to Earth using jet streams from his back, but he freezes into ice. While Cars falls back to Earth into the sea, Susie Q treats him in Venice for 2 weeks before they get married. Jojo appears at his funeral. His family thinks he is dead before Susie Q failed to send the telegram he wrote to his family. His family is happy to see him. Lisa finally tells Jojo she is his mother. They move to America where Lisa remarries in 1948. In 1950, Irina dies of old age. Robert continues with his science research and dies of a heart attack in 1952. Meanwhile, Smokey furthered his education till college, majoring in political science and becoming the first black mayor in Georgia. Major Stroheim, who never saw Jojo again, died in war in 1943. In 1987, an old man who seems to Jojo is seen in the airport trying to catch his flight to Japan to see his grandson for the first time.